Today we will be discussing the timeline of events that surrounded the American Revolution. So, to start off, for a really long time, like over 100 years before the American Revolution, British colonists had been leaving England to come over and make a new life in North America. Like, ever since the colonists landed on Plymouth Rock and signed the Mayflower Compact, British Americans had built a pretty good life for themselves on this side of the pond. Until the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War as some people like to call it, most every British American colonist was happy with the setup, but unfortunately around the time that Great Britain started to fight a war against the French and North American Indians, which the colonists had to join in on with the British, things started to go downhill, to say the least. Fortunately for the British, they won the French and Indian War, but winning a war costs a lot of money. So King George III prohibited any new settlements past the Appalachian Mountains, so to avoid another squabble, which ticked off the colonists because they were like, yo, that's not your business. We want to expand. So that already made the colonists annoyed with the king. And on top of that, the British government was like, yikes, we need to make some money to pay off the war we just won. So the taxing of the colonists began. The British government started taxing the colonists like crazy, taxing everything from sugar to the Stamp Act of 1765, which colonists thought was so lame because they were just taxing them all over the place without any say on how they were being taxed. So after people were getting fed up with all the nonsense that the British government was throwing at the colonies, people started to say, we need some change around here. We do just fine on our own. Who needs the British government? We can run the colonies ourselves. People started stirring up conversation, like Thomas Paine with his pamphlet Common Sense, which used common people language to appeal to the colonists to appeal for independence from Great Britain. And then it started getting real intense. The Boston Massacre occurred on March 5th, 1770, when a group of 9 British soldiers opened fire on a crowd of colonists in Boston, Massachusetts. Sources say that, contrary to popular belief, the soldiers were provoked and the shooting was unintentional by nature, but the soldiers and their commander were still arrested the next morning. Although this temporarily got rid of tensions in the city of Boston, pamphlets like the one you see here circulated among the colonies, which really didn't help the anti-British feelings among the colonies as a whole. The next major event leading up to the Revolutionary War was the Boston Tea Party, and whoa, this event took some guts on the part of the colonists. On December 16, 1773, a group of 70 men dressed up as Native Americans boarded 3 ships that were in the Boston harbor and threw their cargo, which mainly consisted of tea, into the harbor to protest against the Tea Act, which was passed by the British Parliament earlier that year and gave the British East India Company monopoly on tea sales in the colonies. This act of rebellion is what is known to have triggered the chain of events that directly led to the Americans' war for independence. So needless to say, Britain was ticked off about the Boston Tea Party, which led them to pass the Intolerable Acts, otherwise known as the Coerce Acts. These acts closed the Boston harbor to any kind of shipping until the city of Boston agreed to pay for the tea that was destroyed on the night of the tea raid and laws. These acts were intended to be incredible punishments for the colonists, only made the colonists want to fight for their rights and liberties against their British counterparts. So they got moving to make it happen. In September of 1774, representatives from 12 colonies met at what is now known as the First Continental Congress to decide how to react to the Intolerable Acts because, man, these things were lame. They decided to boycott British goods and not allow the export of American goods to Britain until the Intolerable Acts were repealed. The groups decided to meet again if the protests didn't achieve the results they wanted, and oh, they would sure meet again, all right. On April 18, 1775, the British governor of Massachusetts sent hundreds of troops to seize the stores of military supplies that the colonists had stored up in Concord to fight the war they knew was coming. Thankfully, the colonists had a plan in place for such an event as this. Paul Revere rode through the countryside warning the colonists that the British were freaking coming. Because of this warning, the militiamen that had been set up throughout the colonies were able to take up arms and get ready for the fight, those redcoats. The militia were initially defeated early in the day on April 19th. But as the British moved on, they were defeated and forced to head back to Boston, which showed the colonists they could really do this. They could fight for independence. After the fight at Lexington and Concord, the colonists assembled the Second Continental Congress, where George Washington was named Commander-in-Chief of the American Army. On July 4, 1776, the representatives from the colonies signed the Declaration of Independence, which announced the 13 colonies as independent from Britain. However, because the British government just wasn't ready to let the colonies go, the war raged on, but this motion is why we recognize July 4th as America's birthday. Although the war was a definite struggle for the colonists, the Battle of Saratoga that were fought on the same grounds on September 19th and October 7th, and because the colonists were able to prevent the British troops from breaking their lines, the French were encouraged to join the Americans in their fight for independence. Help! Score! After lots of losses in terms of lives and money, on the Yorktown Peninsula, the British commander, General Lord Cornwallis, realized that the chance of the British winning the war moving forward was not likely. So on October 19, 1781, he accepted the terms of surrender. The war was basically over. Almost 2 years later, on September 3rd, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, which ended the American War for Independence and the American Revolution with it. In this treaty, the British Empire accepted the butt-whooping they got from the former colonies and recognized the independence of the United States of America. They were free and independent. Although the view of the American Revolution from the British perspective was that the colonists were just a bunch of ungrateful, rebellious hoodlums. But if they had not done so, America would not be the country that it is today. Now go hug a flagpole or something, because America is the home of the free and the land of the brave because of the bravery shown in the American Revolution. Thanks for watching!